Everyone could see my screen?
Yes,
So we finished
I can see it.
the first section. All right, the first section was basically the generation in the desert, from the Exodus from Egypt until the passing of Moses and appointing Joshua in his place. So now we are entering a new era, and that is the era of Joshua, the judges, all the way up to Anshe Knesset, the
Ik versta je
greatest.
niet, hè? Dat gaat.
Sorry? Okay. So now we are talking about years 2489, which is the year which the Jewish people entered the land, until 3450, or the years minus 1352 or 1352 BCE to 314. We're talking a period of close to 1,000 years. So let's start. Beit Hadin, the Sanhedrin. All right, this is the written law regarding the Sanhedrin. Ki ipale mimecha davar lamishpat. Ipale means if there should be a wondrous, something that you don't know, an unknown question regarding the law. Ben dam ledam, right, between blood and bloods, which bloods are fine. It could be has to do with either questions of murder, questions of women's cycles. Ben din ledin, right? Two neighbors have a dispute. What is the how do you call it? What is the judgment between them? Ben nega la nega, right? If people have back in the times of the Nevi'im, right? People would get leprosy as a punishment, and we have a mitzvah to go to the Kohen, and the Kohen needs to diagnose whether this is a nega that is mitameh, and you should therefore leave the house, or is it fine? Divrei rivot b'sha'arecha, any type of dispute within your community. So what do? V'kamta ve'alita el hamakom asher yivhar Adonai Elohecha bo. Right? You should rise up and go to the place which God has chosen. Right? There is one place where there's going to be a Supreme Court, and it has to be in that place alone. And that's where you go when you have a question that nobody has the answer to. Uvata ela kohanim hanviim. You should go to the priests and the Levites. Ve'ela shofet asher yeh b'yamim ahem. And to the judge that is presiding in those days. V'darashta v'higidu lecha et devar hamishpat. Right? And you should inquire. V'darashta is to inquire. However, we also use that same word with a slightly different meaning. Does this word sound familiar to anybody? V'darashta?
Drash, midrash.
Midrash, exactly, midrash. Midrash doesn't mean inquiry. What is a midrash? Does anybody know what a midrash is?
Commentary.
A commentary, okay. Right, some midrashim are commentaries.
If it's a midrash halakha, it pertains about anything related to Jewish law. If it's a midrash,
So you said midrash halakha, but I couldn't hear what you said after that.
it pertains to any Jewish law. A commentary that pertains to any Jewish law. And on the other hand, anything that's not halakha is agada.
All right, we'll get into the distinction at some point between halakha and agada. But midrash halakha, is that considered halakha or agada?
Midrash halakha, it's halakha, no?
What's that?
Rabbi, the question is if Midrash halakha is agada?
Right.
No,
Is it halakha or agada?
halakha.
Halakha. Okay.
I can be wrong.
Midrash is a part of oral Torah. Midrash is not stories. It's not agada. It's not fairy tales. Midrash is explanation, some kind of
Sometimes it is, though.
explanation of written Torah. So it's not fairy
the
tales.
truth is
Sometimes it is
midrash.
stories.
Sorry.
Sometimes it is stories.
Right. So sometimes it's stories. Sometimes it's commentaries. Sometimes it's completely fabulous imaginary stories that are obviously not literally true. And I'm hoping at the end of this course we'll actually analyze such a midrash that really has some incredible descriptions in it. And some midrashim is like a midrash halakha, which comes to teach a certain law. But the plain interpretation over here is v'darashta, means you shall inquire. However, we'll see this when coming to inquire, the judges use a tool called derasha. And derasha was also the word that we use for a sermon, but it really comes to teach a midrash, and that's what a midrash halakha is.
Rabbi, it's like drasha. That's the, like, I always heard this drasha, which like shirim. Is it the same? You said
Right.
sermon.
So if you open up a book of midrash, many of them will start like Rabbi Oshaya patah, right? Rabbi Oshaya got up and he opened up with these words. And really, a midrash was like a class that the rabbi would teach. Maybe on Shabbat, he would get up like we do many times today, where someone gives a Devar Torah, but then it was the Rosh Yeshiva giving. And that's why it could be a commentary on a certain pasuk. It could be a story. It could be like an accurate description of Torah shebe'al peh, like behind the scenes, things that aren't explicit in the Torah to give us background of a story. And sometimes it could be completely far-fetched, exaggerated. But over here, where it says derasha, this kind of derasha, while the plain meaning of the word here is to inquire, what the Hachamim do is they make a midrash halacha. They use 13 midot in order to extrapolate the law from the text. The darashta is you should inquire. The higidu lecha, and the, how do you call it? And the Hachamim, when they do the derasha, they will tell you what their decision is. Edevar hamishpat. What is the law? ועשית על פי הדבר אשר יגידו לך. Right, and you should do as they told you. מן המקום ההוא אשר יבחר אדוני. Right, you should do as they told you from that place which God has chosen. Which is where? There's one place. Where?
Jerusalem.
The higher
Jerusalem.
court.
There is one place to have to host the Supreme Court, and that's Jerusalem on Temple Mount. Right, and you should beware to keep and to follow everything that they instruct you. Asher yurucha is that they instruct you. Al pi haTorah asher yurucha, according to the law which they instruct, ve'al hamishpat, and the law that they shall tell you, that's what you should do. Ta'aseh. Lo tasur min ad-davar asher yagidu lecha yamin u'smol. Right, you should not stray from what they said, left or right. Ve'ha'ish asher ya'aseh bezadom. However, a person who shall deliberately transgress the instruction of the Supreme Court. לבלתי שמו על הכהן העומד לשרת שם את אדוני אלוהיך, right? To not follow the instruction of the priest, of the Kohen, who is standing before you, serving God, or el shofet, or to the judge who is there. Umet ha'ishahu uvi'arta hara mi'Israel. And that person should be punished by death, and you shall rid yourself of evil among the nation. V'chol ha'am yishmeu v'yirau v'lo yizidun od. And the rest of the nation will see, right? They will hear what happened, and they will fear going against the instruction of the Supreme Court. Okay, any questions so far?
Rabbi, I heard you mentioned 13 midot in terms of promulgating the drasha. What is this? Promulgating the oral law?
Right.
My question is, what is the 13 midot that you're referring? Is it the one in our Siddur that says through a lenient law to a strict one and vice versa?
Sorry, again.
Is this the one that was mentioned in the Siddur? The number one is through a conclusion inferred from a lenient law to a strict one and vice versa?
Right, yeah. Those 13. It's a good question, because there's something else as well that we refer to as the 13 midot. Right? When after how do you call it? The golden calf, right? Moshe goes up to beg for mercy and says, "Show me your ways." And God tells Moses, basically numbers 13 different pathways of mercy. So, and this is what we say in the Selichot on Rosh Hashanah, or more on Yom Kippur, and for the month coming up to Rosh Hashanah, Rahum v'Chanun, right, merciful and graceful, right, and he passes over transgressions and he forgives, and those are different 13 midot, right? But what you mentioned, those are these 13 midot. These are the tools the Chachamim use in order to deduct a conclusion from the written text. Okay, so Beit Din. All right, this is the laws regarding instituting a Beit Din.
I have a question.
Yes.
What should we answer? What midrash is if we are asked on Beit Din? What's the definition of midrash? Thank you.
Okay, actually, there's a whole section later towards the end dealing with midrash. Midrash is very wide; it encompasses many things. So there are a few books of midrashim. The Talmud is made up of the books that are specifically based on midrash halacha, or at least the legal part of the Talmud, and incorporates a lot of stories which are also midrash. So what would be a good answer? I really don't know what the Beit Din is looking for, and what kind of an answer.
Most of the
Midrash,
time they
you
don't
could
ask
say
us.
are basically teachings of the Chachamim, of Chazal. Some of them are halachic, some of them are stories, some of them are interpretations, some of them are commentaries, some of them are historical facts that aren't mentioned in the written law. So I say teachings. Maybe teachings.
Can we say it's a teaching and it's a part of the oral Torah, which explains written Torah?
Yes, definitely.
Is that true?
It's definitely all part of the oral Torah.
Okay, thank you very much. And just and in addition to it, we can say it can be this way, that way, like a story like this, but actually it's a part of oral Torah, teaching of Chachamim.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
Hi, I also have a question. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so you know how you said that the person who goes to seek an answer to whatever query that he has, he has to
Mhm.
follow the judgment that he is given. Do
Right.
we know that back in those days, everyone would have given the same answer? Like, now we have a lot of different opinions and different rabbis tell you to do different things. Like, do we know that the advice or the judgment would be the same across the board in those days?
Okay, are you talking about like a dispute between two neighbors, or a question, are you allowed to do this on Shabbat or not?
Both, I guess.
Okay, so both, let's talk about first, we'll say a dispute. A dispute even today and always, it's all dependent on the judgment that's ruled, because there's no, like, every case is unique, right? So there's no real way of knowing in advance what one Beit Din would rule as opposed to another Beit Din. But anyways, it's not you're going to ask your rabbi. We're talking about you're going to ask the court. So what would happen is, if you had a question like, is this allowed on Shabbat or not? You would go to the court. You would ask the Beit Din. The Beit Din, they either know the answer, and if they know the answer, is all the Beit Dinim know the answer, or they don't know the answer because this particular question is unique and hasn't been discussed before. So if they don't know the answer, they go to the higher Beit Din until they reach the Sanhedrin. And if they don't know the answer, then they need to make a derasha. They're the ones who are authorized to use this tool of derasha in order to reach a conclusion. And the process of how they do that we'll get into a little bit later. Did I
Right.
answer your
Okay.
question?
I think so. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Okay, so מצוות עשה של תורה למנות שופטים ושוטרים בכל מדינה ומדינה ובכל פלח ופלח. All right, so there is a positive commandment to appoint judges and police to carry out the judgments in every single city, and in every city, and in every county, or every like every jurisdiction, like מחוז, right? שנאמר שופטים ושוטרים תיתן לך בכל שעריך. Every single city needs to have a Beit Din ready to provide justice to the population. שופטים אלו הדיינים הקבועים בבית דין, ובעלי דינים באים לפניהם. Right, shofetim, these are judges who are set in every single city, where any two people who have a dispute between them come before them to hear their judgment. Now, he's right, you owe him $20,000. No, you lost his thing. I'm sorry, he was a shomer chinam, and because he didn't receive any salary for volunteering to guard your, how do you call it, to guard your property, and you lost it, he doesn't need to pay you. Whatever it is, any two disputes between people, any dispute between two people reaches the court in every single town, in every single city. כמה בתי דינים קבועים יהיו בישראל ומה יהיה מניינם? Right, so how many courts should there be throughout the nation, and what is their size? קובעים בתחילה בית דין הגדול במקדש. Right, first we assemble the Supreme Court, which sits at the temple site. It's on Temple Mount, somewhere near the temple. והוא הנקרא סנהדרי גדולה. And this is considered this is what we refer to as the Great Sanhedrin. ומניינם 71. Right, and there are 71 members of that Supreme Court, of the Sanhedrin Gedolah. שנאמר אספה לי 70 איש מזקני ישראל. Right, gather unto me 70 people of the elders of Israel. Moshe al Gabehen, and Moshe is he is the president of them. So together with Moshe and the 70 elders, you have 71. Shene'emar vehityasevu sham imach, and they shall stand there together with you. Hare shivim ve'echad. So there we have 71. Hagadol b'chokhmah shebikulan, the greatest in wisdom among the 71, Moshivin oto rosh alehem, right? He is the head of the Sanhedrin, v'hu rosh hayeshiva. This is the original meaning of the term rosh yeshiva, the head of the yeshiva. What is a yeshiva? Yeshiva is a place where people gather and sit to judge. That's called a yeshiva. So the head of the yeshiva, he's the greatest of wisdom, and vehu shekurin oto chachamim nasi, and the chachamim refer to him as nasi. Nasi is president. Bechol makom, vehu haomed tachat Moshe Rabbeinu, and he is the one that stands under Moshe. Umoshivin hagadol shebeshiv'im mishne larosh, and then you take the greatest out of the 70 that are left, and they make him a deputy to the Rosh Yeshiva. V'yoshev mimino, and he sits to his right. V'hu anikra av beit din, right? And he is, call it the administrator of the beit din. V'sh'ar hashivim yoshvin lifnei shelehem, and the rest of the 70 sit before them. Kefi ma'alatav, right? Each one in accordance to his wisdom, to his knowledge, to his greatness. So the youngest one will be the furthest one away. The one with the most potential, with the most wisdom, will be furthest to the right. Vehem yoshvin bekemo hetzi goren beigul, right? And they sit. So there's the two chachamim in the middle, and facing them. Let's see, facing them, you have like a semicircle of the rest of the Chachamim facing them. והם יושבים בכמו חסיגורן בעיגול כדי שיהיה הנשיא עם אב בית דין רואים את כולם. This way, both the nasi, right, the president, and his deputy can see all the Chachamim. In fact, all the Chachamim can see all the other Chachamim when they're sitting in a semicircle. אין מעמידים בסנהדרין בין בגדולה בין בקטנה אלא אנשים חכמים ונבונים. Right, so what are the requirements to be a member of the Sanhedrin? They have to be very wise, and they have to be very intelligent. מופלאים בחוכמת התורה. They know all of the Torah, which is called Gamir v'Savi. They know the entire oral law. Ba'alei de'ah merubba, and they have great knowledge, not just in Torah, right? So they need to know all of the Torah shebe'al peh, all of the Torah, and they need to know a lot of knowledge. V'yod'in k'tzat mish'ar chokhmot, and they need to know at least a little bit of every other wisdom. They need to know some physics, they need to know some medicine, they need to know biology, they even need to know pagan religions and practices. They need to have an understanding in every, at least a little bit, in every single wisdom in the world. Kigon refuot, like medicine, v'cheshbon tekufot, u'mazalot, and astronomy and astrology, v'darkei ha'me'onenim, and the ways of the fortune tellers, v'hakosimim, and the ways of the magicians, v'hamechashefim, v'hevlei avodah zarah, and all hevlei avodah zarah means all the nonsense of the pagan world. They need to have a good understanding of all of it. V'chayoseh ba'elu, kedei sheyu yod'in ladun otam, because they need to be able to judge on these topics. Two people come to court and says, this one cast a spell on me. Say, spell? We don't believe in spells. There's no such thing as magic. You're ridiculous. No, but there's ways, forms of avodah zarah that include casting spells, and they need to be able to judge on those questions. Did what he do constitute a form of avodah zarah or not? Or did he just take a stick and say abracadabra, and that doesn't constitute anything? Any questions?
I do have a question.
Yeah, I'm listening.
So now it should be allowed for us to study science and all the secular subjects. Is it
It should be allowed.
allowed? And
It's,
if we compare this time to back then, also having knowledge in other religions, is it so like recommended or just
Well,
allowed?
the truth, the answer to that question, as most questions, is depends who you ask. That's how it is with us. We are studying right now the writings of Maimonides. Maimonides was considered to be a universal genius in astronomy, in medicine. He was the personal physician of what was his name again? Of the Sultan of Egypt, the King of Egypt, Salah ad-Din, one of the most famous kings of Egypt, sultans of Egypt, Salah ad-Din, who fought in the Crusades. Maimonides was appointed to be his personal physician, his personal doctor. So we're talking about somebody who really, really admires knowledge and science, and definitely, according to Maimonides, it's not just recommended; it's actually a mitzvah to study science.
Okay, and so do ultra-Orthodox, ultra-religious people, do they accept Maimonides, right?
For
Rambam,
something,
they accept, right?
for some things, not for
For
everything.
some things, I see. So they
Right.
wouldn't agree.
You'd
Possibly
have to,
they might not agree this first because they don't agree learning secular
Right.
subject.
right? They may not agree. They'll agree that Maimonides says this, but they won't necessarily agree that in practice it needs to be put into practice.
Okay.
Some will, some won't.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, if I can ask about the women, I suppose in those times it was no question for the women to make part. And what about today?
Okay. By the way, even back then, there were women who were considered part of the Chachamim, and there are even women prophets. Right? We have Huldah HaNevi'ah. She was a prophet. Miriam was considered to be a Nevi'ah. And
Dvora.
today, what's that?
Dvora.
She was a
Deborah.
shofetet. It's
Huldah.
shofet.
Yeah, Devorah was a
Deborah.
Huldah was a
Shofet.
Nevi'ah.
And what about Hannah?
Hannah, I don't know if she's considered to be a prophet, mother of a prophet. I'll just say something that my rabbi said, used to say in his class. He was a professor of Talmud in university, and some people would criticize him for teaching Talmud to women. And he said, that's ridiculous. Women today could be brain surgeons. They can't study a sugya in Talmud. So that was my teacher.
I once heard that there was a woman, I think her name was Brura. She was very, very...
Right. She was one of the Chachamim.
But could they siege together in the like in an assembly, or they were just solitary?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it would be like today. It may be different today. Back then, I don't know of any women who were necessarily part of the Sanhedrin. It is possible. Today could also be a whole different story. We'll have to see once we reinstitute the Sanhedrin.
Yes, okay.
Are you planning on being part of the Sanhedrin?
Oh, I am already with with my memory with holes inside. I don't know. No.
אין קרוי אלוהים אלא בית דין הגדול, right? There is no court that is referred to as Elohim other than the Supreme Court, Beit Din HaGadol. And this also teaches us something about the term Elohim in general. What does Elohim mean? Right?
Mighty one,
What's that?
mighty or men of renown.
Could be mighty. Right, so when it says, right, the first of the Aseret HaDiberot, which we're going to read on Shabbat, the 10 Commandments, says, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, Asher Hoseticha me'eretz Mitzrayim. It's like me saying, I, Sammy, am your teacher. Right? It says, Anochi, I, then he specifies his name. Right? It says Yod Ke Vav Ke, which is the name of God. Elohecha, I am your Elohim. Elohim means supreme authority.
Elohim, it's in plural, right? It's like it contains a lot of powers.
Right. So it could be contains a lot of powers, or it contains all of the authority. Even when we say all the powers, is because we're saying that he has supreme authority over the physical world as well. In Yesodei Torah, the Rambam says, Elohei ha'olam adon kol ha'aretz. He is the supreme authority of the world, in this case, the world being mankind. Elohei ha'olam adon, master kol ha'aretz, of the entire physical universe. All right, so Elohim means supreme authority. And when we look in Bereshit, for instance, it says, Vayiru b'nei ha'elohim et benot ha'adam. It says the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of Adam. So what does that mean?
I'm sorry, can you repeat it again?
So it says, when the pasuk says in Bereshit, Vayiru b'nei ha'elohim, right, and the sons of Elohim saw et benot ha'adam, the daughters of man, and they took wives from all that they chose. So I think the standard Christian interpretation is B'nai Elohim is talking about angelic beings.
It's before the flood, right? When the humanity started to sin, and God decided to devastate it and to make a flood.
Right.
And just, Noah survived. Yeah.
The question
Elohim
is,
probably.
who are these B'nai Elohim?
I think it's people who had power, and they are sons and they are relatives. Probably it's one of the explanations from commentaries.
It's not just one of the explanations. That's the standard traditional interpretation. The first translation that we have is a translation into Aramaic. It says that it was the princes. Rashi says princes. He says the sons of the judges, meaning it was the man of power. or the princes, the sons of the men of power. So it says, En Karui Elohim, the supreme authority of the Jewish people, Ela Bet Din Hagadol, is the Supreme Court, Shenismechu Be'eretz Israel Bilvad, that they were appointed in the land of Israel only. This semicha, this authority to appoint other judges to be part of the Beit Din can only take place in the land of Israel. Vehem ha'anashim ha'chachamim ha're'uyin ladun. Right, and these are the wise men who are worthy of passing judgment, of being judges. Shebadku otan Beit Din shel Eretz Yisrael, that the court of Israel checked to see that they were worthy. Veimhu otan, and they made them, once they saw that they are worthy, they made them mumchin. A mumche is specialist. They made them specialists in judging according to the law. V'samchu otan, and then they appointed them. They certified them to be judges. כשהיה בית דין הגדול קיים, לא הייתה שם מחלוקת בישראל. The times where the Supreme Court existed, there were no disputes in Israel. Disputes as in difference of opinions regarding the law. Why? אלא כל דין שנולד בו ספק לאחד מישראל, שואל לבית דין שבעירו. Right? Any question that anybody in the nation has, he goes to his local Beit Din. Right? If he's in Afula, he goes to the Beit Din in Afula and he asks over there. If he's in Netanya, he goes to the Beit Din in Netanya, and they tell him, Im yadu amru lo. Right? If they knew the answer, then they tell him, Vim lav, hare
Baba.
hashoel.
That don't run you at dawa.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Right. Im yadu amru lo. If they know, they told them, Vim lav, and if not, hare hashoel. Im oto Beit Din, or im shelucho, onin lYerushalayim. Right? So if they don't know, then that person with the inquiry, with that Beit Din, right, the members of the Beit Din of a city, they go up to Jerusalem. אם היה דבר שנולד בו הספק לכל ידוע אצל בית דין הגדול, right, if this question, which this Beit Din, this Afula Beit Din or this Netanya Beit Din, they didn't know, was known. The answer to this question is known to the Supreme Court, ben mipi HaKabbalah, whether through tradition, right, oral tradition from generation to generation, ben min hamidah shedanu ba, or whether it's because they've already passed judgment on this and reached a conclusion, omrin lahem miyad, because it's possible that there was a question. Are you allowed to turn on and off lights and air conditioners on Shabbat, use electricity on Shabbat? And he said, I don't know, there's this new invention, let's go ask the Beit Din. And the Beit Din says, I don't know, right? He's in Netanya, he goes up to the Beit Din Gadol. They go up, the whole Beit Din, they go to Jerusalem. And they say, well, this question on Shabbat, should you be allowed to use electricity on Shabbat or not? And they say, you know what, we think it should be forbidden. It's forbidden. That's it. Okay. And then someone else asks the same question in Beersheba. And they go to the court in Beersheba, and the court in Beersheba says, we don't know. We've never discussed this question before. Let's go to Jerusalem and see. So they go to Jerusalem. They said, oh, yes, the Beit Din of Afula already came to us a month ago with this question. And the conclusion that we reach is that it's forbidden. So they say it's forbidden. And they tell them right away. However, if the Supreme Court They themselves don't have an answer because it's the first time they're being asked this question. Danin bo b'sha'atan. They sit down in judgment right away. They don't push it off. They don't say, we're going to schedule a court date, another 3 months from now and discuss this question. No, that's their job. They sit down, discuss, and reach a conclusion right away. Venos'in venotnin b'davar ad sheyaskimu kulan. And they try to convince each other, right? Because one will say, I'm going to use I'm going to use one of the 13 midot. And according to this midah, I think it should be permissible to use electricity on Shabbat. Electricity is not like fire; it is like something else. And another hacham will say, no, I think it should be equated to fire. It's very similar to fire, and so therefore it should be asur to light and turn off electricity on Shabbat. And now they need to convince each other. Discourse. It says, until they all agree, they reach a consensus. Or if they can't agree, then they'll vote on it, and whatever the majority decide, that's what they will judge. And then we'll respond to all the people who came before them to ask. They say, this is the law. It is asur to use electricity on Shabbat. And then they go home. Everybody goes home. Any questions?
Yes, please. When they were judging, was this an honorary activity, or were they remunerated?
So what do you mean? I didn't understand the question.
Did they siege for free, or they should be paid?
We're reaching now Purim. Purim has a few interesting laws regarding what is considered to be a city, right? Because, back in the times of the Beit Mikdash, you had big cities and you had small villages, and the small villages wouldn't necessarily have a minyan. So they would go to the cities twice a week, right? Every Monday and every Thursday, they would go to the cities. And so Chachamim decided that people who live in the villages, they could read the Megillah on the days that they go to the city. Meaning, if Purim falls on Tuesday, right, you have to read the Megillah on Tuesday. However, in the village, they say, because not everybody knows how to read, or they know how to read it properly. So since the villagers come to the city on Monday, they can read it a day early on Monday. So they ask, okay, so what constitutes a city? Taking a little sidestep, what constitutes a city? They say, any place that has 10 batlanim in it is considered a city. What is 10 batlanim? So it says 10 batlanim are 10 people who are able to stop what they're doing at any time for the sake of serving the public, for the public needs. So you could say maybe it's like the mayor of the city, that's his job, right? Say maybe the treasurer of the city. If a certain place is big enough to have 10 full-time positions, then it's considered to be a city. So there's a discussion. Does that mean that these 10 people are full-time positions? Because what it seems to me is that there are 10 people who, at the drop of a hat, you could find 10 people who are ready to come and take care of the public needs. So I don't think that these judges were necessarily they'd be receiving salaries for their service, but there were enough members of the Sanhedrin that when they needed to convene a Sanhedrin or convene a Beit Din, if it's a Beit Din of three, then three people will come together and sit down in judgment. And if it was a Supreme Court, then they would come together and sit in judgment and decide what the law is. Because we don't see that any of the Hachamim in the Talmud held any paid positions, but they had, each one of them had his own profession. Some of them are rich, some of them are poor, some of them are businessmen, some of them are lumberjacks, some of them would be miners in the coal mines, right? But they were all great Hachamim, and in times where the Hachamim were needed, they came together to sit in judgment.
Yes, I think I'm happy with the answer. And remembering that Boaz was also judge. He was very rich.
Right. Right?
Sami, I have a question.
Yes.
So when the Sanhedrin decided that, okay, electricity is a source, we don't use it, but assume that there may be two rabbis say, nah, I think we can use it. What I learned in the past, that also the minority also was written down.
Okay. That's something else.
Okay, good.
You're talking about something else.
Next time.
So in the Mishnah, really, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, person who put the Mishnah together, he also recorded minority opinions. This way, years later, if someone comes and says, "Oh, but I'm of the opinion that you are allowed to use electricity on Shabbat," they say, "Oh, yes, we know this opinion was recorded as a minority opinion in the Mishnah. However, the Pesach Halacha is according to the majority that it is forbidden." But this we're talking more about strategy of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi in order to compile a text that is representative of the entire nation. However, here we are still 1,000 years before the Mishnah, in the times of the prophets and the times of the judges, until the times of Anshe Knesset HaGedolah, which were the first Chachamim mentioned in the Mishnah, were Anshe Knesset HaGedolah. Over here, everybody made their own records of what the law is, and I don't know if they recorded minority opinions in this stage, because it wasn't really that relevant. Because once the Beit Din makes its judgment, that's the law. And those two Chachamim that had a different opinion, they're still bound by the decision of the Beit Din. We will see later on when you're not bound by the decision of the Beit Din, and may find this surprising. Okay, I think we have time for this one last section here. Unless there's any questions anybody wants to ask. Okay, so I'll continue for this one last section. Samchut Beit Din, the authority of the Beit Din. What authority do they have, or authorities? Beit Din HaGadol Shebirushalayim, right? The Supreme Court that's in Jerusalem. Hem Ikar Torah Shebe'al Peh. They are the foundation of the oral law. Vehem Amud HaHora'ah. Right, and they are the foundation of instruction. They are the ones that teach. Umehem, and from them, Chok u'mishpat yosei lechol Yisrael. Right, according to their judgments, the law is decided and is spread out to the entire nation. Ve'alehem iftiha Torah, shene'emar al pi haTorah asher yorucha. And And regarding this Supreme Court, is what Torah says that you must follow the instructions of the law that they teach. What does that mean? Who do you not need to, as a mitzvah of the Torah, to follow necessarily? Anybody who is not this Supreme Court. So to follow them, zu mitzvah aseh. This is a positive commandment, right? We saw there's a positive commandment to appoint a Supreme Court. There's a positive commandment on the individuals to follow the instructions of the Supreme Court. And anyone who believes and follows or acknowledges the authority of Moshe Rabbeinu and his teachings and his Torah and his laws, חייב לסמוך מעשה הדת אליהם ולהישען עליהם. Right? He needs to associate, he needs to lean upon the instructions, the practical instructions. He emphasizes here the practical instructions of what to do and what not to do. By the way, not necessarily what to believe and not what not to believe, but what to do. That is the jurisdiction of the Beit Din, what to do and what not to do. So the first section is anything that the Beit Din, right, learned through tradition. This is the oral law. באחת מן המידות שהתורה נדרשת בהן ונראה בעיניהן שהדין בדבר זה כך הוא. And the second section that they have jurisdiction on is not just what we received in tradition, but any question that came before them, and they used the midot in order to reach a conclusion. And there is a third part of the jurisdiction, ואחד דברים שעשו אותן סייג לתורה לפי מה שהשעה צריכה. And there are also things that the Beit Din decided to enact, right? Like Purim, like Hanukkah, like maybe, we have an Isur on Pesach, Isur deoraita to eat chametz, right? On Pesach. And Chachamim came and said, you know what? Also anything that has ta'arovet chametz, anything that has chametz mixed into it. So not just a loaf of bread, but even like, let's say, a stew with croutons in it, which is a mixture of chametz and non-chametz. They say that is also forbidden, right? Why? Because they saw there was some sort of need in their generation to prevent this. והם הגזרות והתקנות והמנהגות בכל אחד ואחד משלושה דברים אלו מצוות עשה לשמוע להם. In each one of these three categories, you have a positive mitzvah to follow their instruction. וכן הגזרות והתקנות והמנהגות, right? And so we said the third part of that, what they have authority over, what's mitzvah to listen to, is their gezerot. אם ראו מקצתן שראוי לגזור גזרה זו, וראו מקצתן שאין ראוי לגזור גזרה זו, right? Some of the Chachamim say, the Torah says, לא תבשל גדי בחלב אמו, right? You're not allowed to eat milk and meat together. And some of the Chachamim say, you know what? Poultry is not part of this mitzvah. Meaning, from the Torah, poultry, you're allowed to have a schnitzel, and instead of frying it in oil, you can fry it in butter. That's fine, according to the Torah. But then the Chachamim saw that people said, wait, if poultry, if you can fry your poultry, your schnitzel, your chicken breast in butter, then why can't you do the same thing with a nice piece of steak? Poultry, chicken and steak, they look similar. they're both different kinds of flesh. And so Hachamim saw that people were mixing up poultry with meat. And so the Hachamim decided, we're going to make a siyaga Torah. We're going to make an extra protection from transgressing an Isur Doraita, and we are going to forbid eating poultry together with dairy. However, Rabbi Yosef HaGalili, right, he lived up in the Galilee. He was further away from the mass of the nation. And in the Galil, people didn't mix poultry with meat. They didn't confuse them. And he says, no, I don't see any reason to enact this kind of gezerah. We actually really like making our schnitzels in butter. We don't want to give that up. Why should we give that up? Teach your people not to make schnitzel, not to make steaks in butter, and everything is fine. Okay, so the Hachamim, they need to decide. They need to decide, is poultry part of going to be forbidden to have with dairy or not? Some say yes, and some say no. What do we do? Nus'in ve'notnin, elu keneged elu. They have to have a discussion. They need to convince each other. Same thing that we did before with the Yud Gimel Midot. If they convince each other, great. If not, the majority decides, and they decided that you cannot make your schnitzels in butter. And that is the law until today. Later on, we'll see if there's any way to undo that law. If the Sanhedrin, a future Sanhedrin, could potentially decide, you know what, schnitzel and butter actually sounds like a good idea. Maybe we'll bring that back, or maybe they can't. I think we'll get to that more in the next week's class. Divrei Kabbalah in Bain Mahloket Kilal. Anything that we received in tradition, there is never any dispute about it. No sabu mahloket. בכל דבר שתמצא בו מחלוקת, בידוע שאינו קבלה ממשה רבנו. Anytime we reach a discussion in the Talmud and we see that there is some sort of dispute between the Hachamim, then we know for sure that that dispute was not something that there was a tradition of from Moshe Rabbeinu. ודברים שלומדים מן הדין, אם הסכימו עליהם בית דין הגדול כולם, הרי הסכימו. ואם נחלקו בהן, הולכין אחר הרוב, ומוציאין הדין אחד לרבים. Right, and I think they learned from the 13 midot, if everyone agreed upon in the Beit Din, then they agreed, and then there's no machloket. And if there was a dispute, then you go according to the majority. Whatever the majority decides, that is the law, and there is no more dispute on this question anymore. And this is where we'll finish for today. And if anybody has any questions, I would just like to point out that makes me very satisfied and happy that today there were a lot more questions than previously. And please continue asking more.
Thank you.
Even if I don't know.